Daehyun stood at the window of his small office, watching the children play in the common area below. 23 kids. 23 reasons to wake up every morning. 23 souls who depended on him to keep them safe. The orphanage on Taeyang 7 Station wasn't much to look at. The walls needed painting. The furniture was secondhand. The heating system made strange noises at night. But it was home. The children had beds, hot meals, and most importantly, they had someone who cared whether they lived or died. Outside the window, little Sola was teaching a group of younger children a game from Earth. Her dark hair bounced as she laughed. She was 8 now. Daehyun had found her in the rubble of a destroyed colony 4 years ago, clutching a burned stuffed animal. She'd looked at him with those big eyes and asked if he was there to help. He'd said yes. He'd been saying yes ever since. Minji knocked on his office door. She was the orphanage teacher, barely 25 but wise beyond her years. She carried a data tablet and her face was pale. Daehyun, we have visitors. Union officials. They say it's urgent. He felt his stomach tighten. Official visits were never good news. The Union barely acknowledged their existence most days. When they did pay attention, it usually meant budget cuts or new regulations. How many? He asked. 3. And they brought soldiers. That was worse than he'd thought. Daehyun straightened his worn shirt and headed down to the main entrance. His mind raced through possibilities. Maybe the station was being evacuated. Maybe there was a new war starting. Maybe they'd finally decided the orphanage was too expensive to maintain. The main hall felt cold despite the humming heaters. 5 Vryn soldiers stood along the walls, their insect-like bodies perfectly still, weapons held ready. Vryn were efficient creatures. They followed orders without question, without emotion. That made them excellent soldiers and terrible company. 3 officials waited in the center of the room. 2 were Vryn bureaucrats, their multiple eyes scanning documents on holographic displays. The 3rd was human. That surprised Daehyun. The man was young, maybe 30, with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. He looked at Daehyun with something between pity and contempt. Administrator Daehyun? The human official asked. That's me. What's this about? The man gestured to one of the Vryn, who projected a document into the air between them. Official seals glowed at the top. Galactic Union Emergency Decree 771. I'm Taijin, Union Enforcement Division. I'm here to inform you of new regulations regarding dependent biological units in frontier zones. Daehyun hated that phrase. Dependent biological units. They meant people. They meant children. Go on, he said carefully. Taijin's voice was flat, mechanical. He'd probably given this speech 100 times already. Due to the economic strain of the frontier wars, the Galactic Union Council has determined that non-productive individuals in outer sectors represent an unsustainable resource allocation. Emergency Decree 771 mandates the transfer of all such individuals to labor rehabilitation colonies, where they can contribute to the war effort. The words didn't make sense at first. Daehyun's brain refused to process them. Labor colonies? The children? You're talking about the orphans, he said slowly. Correct. All dependent biological units currently housed in this facility will be transferred to colony designation Theta 9 within 72 hours. Transportation will be provided. You are to prepare them for departure. The room seemed to tilt. Daehyun grabbed the edge of a nearby table. Behind him, he heard Minji gasp. She'd been listening from the doorway. Labor colonies, Daehyun repeated. You mean work camps? You mean slavery? Taijin's expression didn't change. The colonies provide valuable training and contribution opportunities. The alternative is allowing non-productive units to drain resources needed for the war effort. The Council has determined this is the most logical solution. They're children. They are biological units capable of basic labor tasks. The decree is comprehensive and applies to all frontier zones. Compliance is mandatory. Daehyun felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous. He'd seen labor colonies during his military service. Prisoners and volunteers working until they dropped, fed barely enough to survive, dying by the thousands. The Union called it rehabilitation. Everyone else called it what it was. No, he said. Taijin blinked. I'm sorry. I said no. You're not taking these children. The Vryn soldiers shifted slightly. Taijin's professional mask cracked, showing irritation beneath. Administrator, you don't appear to understand. This isn't a request. Emergency Decree 771 has full council authority. Compliance is not optional. Then you'll have to arrest me. if necessary. Taejin glanced at the Vrin soldiers. However, I'd prefer to avoid unnecessary conflict. You have 72 hours to prepare the units for transfer. I suggest you use that time wisely. Cooperation will be noted in your record. Get out of my orphanage. Taejin's eyes hardened. You're making a mistake. The Union doesn't tolerate obstruction of official decrees. You're one man running a failing facility in the middle of nowhere. You have no resources, no support, no leverage. Fighting this will only make things harder for everyone, especially the children. I said get out. For a long moment, Taejin stared at him. Then he nodded to the Vrin soldiers. They filed out silently, followed by the bureaucrats. Taejin paused at the door. 72 hours, Administrator. After that, we come back with authorization to use force. Think about what's best for the children. He left. The door hissed shut. Taehyun stood alone in the empty hall, his hands shaking. Minji came up beside him. What are we gonna do? She whispered. Taehyun didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing, calculating, planning. 72 hours. 3 days to figure out how to protect 23 children from the entire Galactic Union. 3 days to do the impossible. That evening, he gathered the children in the common room. They sat on worn couches and patched floor cushions, looking up at him with trust in their eyes. Sola sat in the front row hugging her stuffed animal. Kids, he began, then stopped. How did you tell children they were being hunted? How did you explain that the people who were supposed to protect them had decided they were worthless? Something bad is happening, he finally said. Some bad people want to take you away from here. They want to send you to a place where you'll have to work all day, where you won't be safe or happy. Junho, a teenage boy with a scar across his cheek, spoke up. Are you going to let them? Daehyun looked at each face. These children had already lost everything once. Their families, their homes, their worlds. They'd survived wars and disasters and horrors that would break most adults. They'd ended up here in this broken-down orphanage because no one else wanted them. But he wanted them. They were his family. Not by blood, but by choice. And family meant something. No, Daehyun said firmly. I'm not going to let them take you. I promise. Sola stood up and walked to him. She wrapped her small arms around his waist. You're really going to fight the whole Union for us? He picked her up, held her close. If I have to. The other children gathered around them. Minji joined them, tears streaming down her face. They stood together in the dim light of the common room, a tiny family against the galaxy. That night, after the children were asleep, Daehyun sat at his desk and began making calls. Old military contacts, friends from his service days. Anyone who might help. Most didn't answer. Those who did said they were sorry, but they couldn't get involved. Fighting the Union was suicide, but a few said yes. A few said they'd come. A few said that sometimes doing the right thing mattered more than doing the smart thing. Daehyun pulled up schematics of the orphanage on his computer. He'd been a combat engineer in his military days. He knew how to fortify positions, how to make a building into a fortress. It wouldn't stop the Union forever, but it might stop them long enough. Long enough for what, he didn't know yet, but he'd figure it out. He had to, 3 days. The countdown had begun. The first thing Daehyun did was seal the main entrance. He worked through the night, welding reinforcement plates over the doors, rerouting the locking mechanism so only he could open them. His hands remembered the work from his military days, even if his body protested the long hours. Minji found him at dawn, covered in sweat and metal dust. She carried 2 cups of coffee and dark circles under her eyes. Neither of them had slept. The children are asking questions, she said, handing him a cup. They know something's wrong. Tell them the truth. We're getting ready to keep them safe. And when the Union comes back, Daehyun tested the door seal. Solid. It would hold against small arms fire, maybe even light explosives. Then we don't open the door. Minji was quiet for a moment. You know this is crazy, right? We can't hold off the Union military. Even if we somehow survive the first assault, they'll just wait us out. We have maybe 2 weeks of food supplies. I know. So what's the plan? Daehyun took a long drink of bitter coffee. The truth was, he didn't have a complete plan. Just pieces of one, ideas forming in his exhausted mind. But one piece was solid. I sent out messages last night. To my old squad. To anyone I thought might help. A few responded. They're coming. How many? 5, maybe 6. Not enough to fight a war, but enough to make the Union think twice about just storming in. He pulled out his personal communicator and showed her a message. It was from Jinho, his former squad leader. The message was short. On my way. Bringing supplies and attitude. Minji almost smiled. I remember you talking about him. The one who got you out of that ambush on Kepler Station? That's him. If anyone can help us pull off a miracle, it's Jinho. The second day passed in frantic preparation. Daehyun showed Junho and some of the older kids how to seal emergency bulkheads. He taught them where the backup power supplies were, how to activate life support if the main systems went down. He tried to make it sound like a game, like emergency training, but the kids weren't stupid. They understood what was coming. Sola followed him everywhere, watching him work. She didn't ask many questions. She just stayed close as if afraid he might disappear. Dad, she said that evening. She'd started calling him that a year ago. He'd never corrected her. Yeah, kiddo? Are we going to be okay? Daehyun knelt down so they were eye level. He'd learned early never to lie to children. They always knew. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe. All of you. But it's going to be scary for a while. Can you be brave for me? Sola nodded seriously. I can be brave. Will you be brave too? I'll try. She hugged him tight. That's good enough. On the morning of the third day, Jinho arrived. His ship docked at a cargo port on the far side of the station, away from official channels. He came through maintenance tunnels with 3 others, 2 humans and a Corvan merchant who owed Jinho a favor. Jinho looked exactly the same as Daehyun remembered. Solid build, scarred face, eyes that missed nothing. He dropped a heavy bag of supplies and grabbed Daehyun in a crushing hug. You always did know how to pick fights with the wrong people, Jinho said. This time it matters. They always matter, brother. They always matter. Jinho looked around the orphanage at the sealed doors and jury-rigged defenses. Not bad for 3 days. But we need to do better. Where's your weapons locker? Don't have one. This is an orphanage, Jinho laughed. It's about to be a fortress. Good thing I brought party favors. The bag he'd brought contained enough weapons to hold off a small army. Nothing military grade, but street weapons, civilian arms, things that wouldn't immediately get them labeled as terrorists. Jinho had always been good at walking the line between legal and useful. They had maybe 4 hours before Taejin's deadline expired. Daehyun used every minute. While Jinho set up defensive positions, Daehyun contacted one more person, Hyerin, a hacker who worked in the station's lower levels. They'd met years ago when she'd tried to steal orphanage funds. She'd been young and desperate. Instead of reporting her, Daehyun had given her a job helping with their computer systems. She'd never forgotten. I need a favor, he told her over an encrypted channel. A big one. Name it. When the union comes for the children, I'm going to refuse. I need everyone on this station to see what happens next. Can you broadcast it? There was a pause. Then Hyerin's voice came back, excited and nervous. You want me to hack the station's communication network and stream your standoff with Union enforcers to every screen on Taeyang 7? Yes, that's incredibly illegal. I know. I love it. Give me 20 minutes. Exactly 4 hours after Jinho's arrival, Taejin returned. This time he brought 12 Vrin soldiers and 2 armored transport vehicles. They assembled in front of the orphanage's main entrance like an invasion force. Daehyun met them at the sealed door. He activated the external speaker so his voice would carry. You're not taking the children. Taejin stood below, looking up at the camera. Administrator Daehyun, your time has expired. Emergency Decree 771 is now in full effect. Open this door immediately or we will open it for you. No. This is your final warning. We are authorized to use force. Daehyun took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything depended on what happened next. Then use it. But I want everyone watching to understand what you're really doing. You're not enforcing law. You're stealing children to use as slaves. You're the ones breaking every principle the Galactic Union claims to stand for. Behind him, he heard Minji's voice. We're live. Every screen on the station. Taejin's expression changed as he realized what was happening. He looked around and saw station residents stopping to watch. Screens throughout the commercial districts, the residential areas, the docking bays, all showed the same image. A human man standing in a doorway, protecting children from armed soldiers. This is illegal broadcasting, Taejin said, but his voice had lost its certainty. So arrest me. But first try to take these children. I want everyone to see what the Union has become. A crowd was gathering now. Station residents, workers, merchants, all stopping to watch. Some recorded on personal devices. The feed was spreading beyond Taeyang 7, bouncing through communication networks to other stations, other colonies. Taejin's jaw clenched. You're making this worse for yourself. I'm making it clear where I stand. These children are not property. They're not units. They're people with names and dreams and the right to grow up safe. If you want them, you'll have to go through me. The Vrin soldiers raised their weapons. The crowd gasped. Daehyun didn't move. He stood in the doorway alone and unprotected, staring down 12 armed aliens who could kill him in seconds. But something unexpected happened. The crowd began to murmur. Then someone shouted, "Leave the children alone!" Others joined in. The murmur became a chorus. Taejin looked around, suddenly uncertain. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The decree was legal. He had authority. But authority meant nothing if people refused to recognize it. "Stand down," Taejin ordered the soldiers. They lowered their weapons slightly, confused by the conflicting signals. Daehyun pressed his advantage. "You can kill me. You can probably break through these doors eventually. But now the whole galaxy is watching. Every person who sees this will know that the Galactic Union orders soldiers to drag orphans away to labor camps. Is that really the message the Council wants to send?" Taejin's face was red. "This broadcast is illegal propaganda. This broadcast is the truth. And the truth is that you came here to take children from their home and send them to die in work camps. That's what Emergency Decree 771 really means." The crowd was getting louder. Some were angry at the Union. Others were angry at Daehyun for causing trouble. But everyone was watching. Everyone was talking. The secret was out. Taejin made a cutting gesture to his soldiers. "Fall back. We're not doing this in front of cameras." The Vrin soldiers retreated to their transports. Taejin looked up at the camera one last time. "This isn't over, Administrator. You've just made yourself an enemy of the Union. We'll be back with proper authorization, and next time there won't be cameras to hide behind." The transports pulled away. The crowd slowly dispersed, still arguing among themselves. Daehyun slumped against the wall, his legs suddenly weak. Jinho appeared beside him, grinning. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen. Maybe both. Did it work? You bought time. How much, I don't know. But the whole station is talking. The whole sector, probably." Minji was crying and smiling at the same time. The children watched. They wanted to see you. To see someone standing up for them. Daehyun thought about that. 23 children who'd learned that sometimes one person could make a difference. That standing up for what was right mattered, even when it seemed impossible. He just hoped he'd be able to keep that promise. Because Taejin was right about one thing. They would be back. And next time they'd be ready for resistance. The siege had begun. The broadcast changed everything. Within hours, the footage of Daehyun standing alone against Union soldiers spread across a dozen star systems. Human colonies watched it. Alien worlds watched it. Even the core worlds where the Galactic Council met couldn't ignore it. Some called Daehyun a hero. Others called him a terrorist. But everyone had an opinion. Inside the orphanage, life took on a strange new rhythm. The children still had lessons with Minji in the morning. They still ate meals together, played games, did chores. But now armed adults stood guard at every entrance. Now the windows were covered with blast shields. Now everyone spoke in whispers about what might happen next. Jinho organized the defenses like the military operation it had become. He positioned his people at key points, set up communication relays, and prepared fallback positions if the Union breached the outer doors. He worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before because he had. "We can hold for maybe a week if they hit us hard," he told Daehyun on the 4th day. 2 weeks if we're lucky and they try a siege instead of an assault. After that, we run out of food, water, or ammunition. Probably all three. Then we need to make this matter before then, Daehyun said. Matter how? I don't know yet. But there has to be a way to turn this into something bigger than just us holding a building. The answer came from an unexpected source. Hiren, the hacker who'd broadcast the standoff, appeared in the maintenance tunnels that connected to the orphanage. She'd brought someone with her. A thin, nervous alien with crystalline skin that marked them as Axion. "This is Kyle," Yaren said. "They work for the Union administration. They want to talk to you." Daehyun studied the Axion carefully. The Axion Collective was one of the major powers in the Union. They made most decisions through group consensus, their crystalline bodies allowing them to share thoughts directly. An individual Axion acting alone was unusual. And suspicious, why? Dahyun asked. Kale's voice resonated like chimes. Because the decree is wrong. Many of us know it. But the collective moves slowly, and the Vryn have influence over the council. By the time we form consensus to oppose it, thousands of children will be in labor camps. So what do you want from me? Time, keep resisting. Every day you hold creates more pressure on the council. Already 3 minor species have formally protested. The Corvin merchants are threatening trade sanctions. Even some Vryn are questioning the decree privately. Jinho stepped forward. You're asking him to be a symbol. To hold out while the politics play out. You know they'll kill him eventually, right? Kale's crystalline surface shifted colors, showing distress. I know, but if he stops now, the decree stays. Children die. If he keeps fighting, maybe something changes. I cannot promise success. I can only promise that what you're doing matters. Dahyun thought about it. He'd never wanted to be a symbol. He'd just wanted to protect his kids. But maybe that was the same thing. Keep fighting, he said. Got it. After Kale left, Minji pulled Dahyun aside. Her face was drawn, exhausted from stress and lack of sleep. The children are scared, she said. They hear the adults talking. They know we're trapped here. Sola had nightmares last night. What did you tell her? That you wouldn't let anything bad happen. That you promised. Dahyun felt the weight of that promise. How could he keep it? They were surrounded, outgunned, and running out of time. But he'd made that promise, and promises to children were sacred. That night, he gathered all the kids in the common room again. They sat quietly, their usual energy dampened by fear. Sola sat in front as always, but now she clutched his hand like a lifeline. I know you're scared, Dahyun said. I'm scared too, but I want you to understand something. What we're doing here matters. Not just for us, but for kids all over the galaxy. Right now, people are watching us. They're arguing about whether children should be protected or used. And every day we hold out, more people join our side. Junho raised his hand. But we can't hold forever. Eventually they'll get in. Maybe. But maybe by then the whole galaxy will have changed its mind. Maybe by then enough people will stand with us that the Union has to back down. A small voice from the back. What if they don't? Dahyun looked at the child who'd spoken, a young alien with large eyes. Then at least we fought. At least we showed everyone that some things are worth fighting for. That children matter. That family matters. That doing what's right is more important than doing what's easy. Sola squeezed his hand. I'm not scared anymore. No? I'm still scared. But I'm also proud. Proud that you're my dad. The other children murmured agreement. Minji wiped tears from her eyes. Jinho, watching from the doorway, nodded with respect. On the 7th day, ships began arriving at Taiyang 7. Not Union ships. Human ships. Dozens of them. Freighters. Passenger vessels. Even a few old military cruisers that had been decommissioned years ago. They came from Earth colonies from Mars, from the scattered human settlements throughout the frontier. They positioned themselves around the station and sent a simple message to the Union forces. Touch the orphanage, and you go through us first. Taejin was furious. Dahyun watched on monitors as the Union enforcer argued with human ship captains, demanding they disperse. They refused. They had every legal right to be there. They weren't threatening anyone. They were just present, watching, waiting. Not one child became their motto. Hire and spread it through every network she could hack. It appeared on signs throughout the station. It trended on galactic social media. Humans everywhere adopted it, a simple statement of solidarity. But the Union wasn't backing down either. More Vryn warships arrived. The hierarchy wanted to crush this rebellion before it spread. They couldn't allow one human administrator to defy council authority. They positioned their forces for an assault, human blockade or not. The tension was unbearable. Everyone knew a fight was coming. The only question was when. On the 10th day, something unexpected happened. Nari, one of the alien orphans, a small creature with telepathic abilities, asked to speak to Dahyun privately. I can help, Nari said in their quiet voice. I can reach out. Talk to people through the station networks. Talk how? With feelings. I can show them what it's like here. What the children feel. Fear, but also hope. Love. Family. I can make them understand why you're fighting. Dahyun hesitated. That could be dangerous for you. Using your abilities like that. Broadcasting emotions to thousands of people. I'm already in danger. We all are. At least this way I can help. So Nari sat in the center of the common room, surrounded by the other children, and opened their mind to the station. Through computer networks, through the telepathic receivers that many species used for communication, Nari sent out waves of emotion. Not words, not arguments, just the pure feeling of children who wanted to be safe, who wanted to grow up, who wanted the chance to have families. Throughout Taeyang 7, people stopped what they were doing. They felt Nari's broadcast, felt the children's fear and hope. Station workers, merchants, union bureaucrats, even some of the Vrin soldiers all felt it. And for many of them, something changed. It's hard to justify sending children to work camps when you can feel their terror. It's hard to follow orders when you've touched the innocent love of a child asking only to be protected. A Vrin soldier broke ranks and removed their helmet. Others followed. They didn't speak. They didn't formally desert. They just quietly stopped being willing to attack an orphanage full of scared children. Taijin saw his forces crumbling and called for reinforcements. But reinforcements were slow to come. The politics were shifting. The public pressure was building. Even the Vrin hierarchy was starting to fracture over the issue. Inside the orphanage, Daehyun held Sola while she slept. Minji sat beside him, equally exhausted. Jinho stood guard at the door, weapons ready but hoping he'd never have to use them. "Do you think it's working?" Minji whispered. "I don't know," Daehyun admitted. "But we're still here. The kids are still safe. That's all that matters right now. How long can we keep this up? As long as we have to." Outside, the human ships held their positions. The Vrin forces held theirs. The whole galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. And in the center of it all, in a small, shabby orphanage on a forgotten station, 23 children slept peacefully, knowing that someone loved them enough to fight the entire universe for them. The siege continued, but something had shifted. The Union had expected quick compliance. Instead, they'd gotten a standoff that was costing them political capital by the hour. Every day Daehyun held out was another day for opposition to build, for cracks to form in the Council's unity. Kyle visited again through the maintenance tunnels. The Council meets tomorrow. They'll vote on whether to escalate or negotiate. It's close, very close. What happens if they vote to escalate? Then the Vrin get authorization to take the orphanage by any means necessary. They won't care about human ships or public opinion. They'll make an example of you. And if they vote to negotiate, then maybe, just maybe, we can end this without bloodshed. After Kale left, Daehyun stood at the window again, watching the children. They were playing a game, their laughter echoing through the halls. For a moment, he could almost forget they were in the middle of a siege, almost forget that everything hung by a thread. Sola looked up and waved at him. He waved back. Whatever happened tomorrow. The day of the council vote, Daehyun couldn't eat. His stomach was twisted in knots. Everything they'd done, everything they'd risked, came down to this. Alien politicians in a distant chamber would decide whether his children lived free or died in chains. Jinho found him staring at a blank wall in his office. "You're spiraling. Stop it. I can't. What if we did all this for nothing? What if they vote to attack anyway? Then we fight. And we make them remember us." Jinho sat down across from him. "But that's not what's going to happen. You've already won, Daehyun. You just don't see it yet." "How can you say that? We're trapped, surrounded, running out of supplies when the whole galaxy is watching. The Union Council isn't stupid. They see what this has become. A single human protecting orphans has done more damage to their reputation than a dozen military defeats. They're going to back down. They have to." Daehyun wanted to believe him, but years of disappointment had taught him that hope was dangerous. "And if you're wrong, then we go down fighting, together. But I'm not wrong." The council vote was scheduled for 14 on station time. Hiren hacked into the broadcast so they could watch from the orphanage. The entire staff gathered in the common room with the children. Even the younger ones understood that something important was happening. The council chamber appeared on screen. Representatives from dozens of species sat in a massive circular room. The Vrin hierarchy controlled the largest block of seats. They would be pushing hard for escalation. Ambassador Youngji, representing humanity, stood to speak first. She was a small woman with steel in her voice. "Members of the council, we stand at a crossroads. Emergency Decree 771 was presented as economic necessity. We are told that removing children from frontier zones will help the war effort. But let's call this what it really is, slavery. We are debating whether to send children to labor camps where they will work until they die. The Vryn representatives hissed their displeasure. Their leader, a massive insect called Thrak, rose to respond. Humanity always makes emotional arguments. The decree is logical. These biological units consume resources without contributing. The camps give them purpose, training, a way to serve the greater good. Purpose? Youngji's voice cut like a blade. These are children. Their purpose is to grow up safe, to learn, to become adults who remember that the galaxy protected them when they were vulnerable. Instead, you want to teach them that the strong devour the weak. The debate raged for hours. Representatives from smaller species spoke about their concerns. The Corvin merchants explained how the decree was already damaging trade relationships. Several species that had been quiet before now voiced opposition. The cracks Kale had mentioned were showing, but the Vryn wouldn't budge. They had military power, economic influence, and they weren't afraid to use both. Thrak made thinly veiled threats about reconsidering security agreements, withdrawing protection, allowing unfortunate incidents to occur. Daehyun watched it all with growing dread. It was going to come down to a vote, and the Vryn had the numbers. They were going to win. Then something unexpected happened. An Axion representative stood, not just any Axion, a high-ranked member of their collective. Their crystalline body shimmered as they spoke. The Axion Collective wishes to make a statement. We have reviewed all data regarding Emergency Decree 771. We have analyzed the economic arguments, the military necessity, the logical frameworks presented, and we have reached consensus. The chamber went silent. The Axion were known for being slow to decide but absolute once they did. Their voice would carry enormous weight. The decree is fundamentally flawed. It assumes that the value of a being is measured only in immediate economic contribution. This is logically inconsistent with the founding principles of the Galactic Union, which state that all sapient life has inherent worth. Furthermore, our analysis shows that the long-term economic and social costs of the decree far outweigh any short-term benefits. We are creating a generation that will remember being abandoned by the Union. This will destabilize frontier regions for decades. Thrak tried to interrupt, but the Axion continued, their voice resonating through the chamber. More importantly, we must address what is happening on Taeyang 7 Station. A single human administrator has forced us to confront a simple question. What are we willing to do to enforce this decree? Are we willing to kill an unarmed man in front of children? Are we willing to use military force against civilians to capture orphans? These questions have only one moral answer. The collective moves to void Emergency Decree 771, immediately and permanently. Furthermore, we propose the Sapient Rights Protection Act, which will establish permanent safeguards for vulnerable populations throughout Union space. The time for this debate is over. We must choose who we want to be. The chamber erupted. Arguments flew back and forth. But the Axion's statement had shifted the momentum. Other species began changing their positions, announcing support for the motion. The political calculus had changed. The cost of supporting the decree had become too high. In the orphanage common room, the adults held their breath. The children sensed the tension, sitting quietly and watching the screen even though most didn't understand the politics. The vote was called. Representatives entered their decisions into holographic interfaces. The count appeared on screens throughout the chamber. 724 in favor of voiding the decree, 412 against, 103 abstaining. It passed. Emergency Decree 771 was dead. The common room exploded in cheers. Children jumped and hugged each other. Minji sobbed openly. Jinho grabbed Daehyun in a crushing hug, laughing. I told you we'd win! Daehyun couldn't speak. The relief was too overwhelming. His legs gave out and he sank to the floor. Sola climbed into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. We're safe? She asked. You're safe, he managed. You're all safe. But even as celebration filled the orphanage, Daehyun saw Youngji stand again on the screen. She wasn't celebrating. Her face was grim. Thank you, Council, for making the right choice. But let's not forget why we're here. A human administrator and 23 children had to barricade themselves and face down military force, because we created this decree in the first place. We have a lot of work to do to ensure this never happens again. She was right. The decree was voided, but the damage was done. Trust was broken. The Union had shown its true face, and billions of beings wouldn't forget that easily. Over the next few days, Taeyang 7 Station slowly returned to normal. The Vrin forces withdrew. The human blockade dispersed. Station residents who had gathered to watch the standoff went back to their lives. Taejin came to the orphanage one last time. He stood at the door, no longer backed by soldiers, looking uncertain and uncomfortable. The decree is voided. You're free to resume normal operations. Daehyun studied him. Is that all you came to say? Taejin was quiet for a long moment. I need you to understand I was following orders. I believed the council knew what was best. I thought I was serving the greater good. And now? Now I don't know what I believe. I watched you stand alone against a force that could have killed you without effort. I saw you choose possible death over betraying children. That's not something we teach in enforcement training. We're taught to follow orders, trust authority, serve the system. Maybe that's the problem. Taejin nodded slowly. Maybe it is. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, what you did, it mattered. It changed things. It changed me. After he left, Jinho started packing up the defensive equipment. The weapons would be returned to whatever gray market sources he'd acquired them from. The blast shields would come down. The orphanage would go back to being just an orphanage, but it wouldn't be the same. It couldn't be. What had happened here had rippled out across the galaxy, changing millions of minds, shifting the course of history in small but important ways. That evening, Daehyun sat with Minji in his office. She was updating records, making notes about which children needed new clothes, who had birthdays coming up. Normal daily concerns. It felt surreal after everything they'd been through. Do you think it's really over? She asked. The siege is. But the bigger fight? That's just starting. The Sapient Rights Protection Act will take months to finalize. There will be resistance, loopholes, people trying to weaken it. We can't let that happen. What can we do? We're just running an orphanage. Just. Daehyun smiled. We stood against the entire Union and won. We showed that sometimes one person in the right place can change everything. That's not small. That's never small. Minji looked at him with new eyes. You're not going to let this go, are you? You're going to keep fighting. Someone has to. And I know how to fight for children now. I've had practice. Word of the orphanage spread. Donations poured in from across the galaxy. Species that had never heard of Taeyang 7 sent supplies, funding, offers of support. People wanted to be part of what had happened here. They wanted to contribute to the place where one human had said no to injustice. Within weeks, the orphanage had more resources than it had seen in years. They could finally fix the heating system, replace the old furniture, buy new educational materials, hire more staff, expand to help more children. But the most important donation came from an unexpected source. Kale, the Axian who had helped her 3 months after the siege ended. Life in the orphanage had found a new rhythm. The old furniture was gone, replaced by comfortable beds and proper desks. The walls were freshly painted. The heating system worked perfectly. Everything looked different, better, more permanent. But the real changes went deeper than paint and furniture. The children walked with more confidence now. They'd learned that they mattered, that the galaxy would fight for them. That knowledge changed everything. Junho, the teenager with the scarred face, approached Daehyun one morning with a request. I want to learn what you did. How to protect people, how to make defenses. All of it. You want military training? No, I want to learn how to keep people safe. There's a difference. Daehyun saw himself in the boy's determined eyes. He'd been the same at that age, driven by the need to protect others. Okay, we'll start with basic engineering. But you keep up with your other studies too. Deal. The partnership with the Axion Collective was moving forward. Kale visited regularly, bringing plans and proposals. They were establishing orphanages on 15 different stations, all modeled after Daehyun's approach. But they needed trained staff, people who understood the philosophy behind the work. We need you to travel, Kale explained during one visit. Visit the new locations. Train the administrators. Show them how you built this place. I can't leave the children. You'd only be gone a few weeks at a time, and Minji is more than capable of managing here. Besides, you'd be helping thousands of other children. Isn't that worth the temporary absence? Daehyun struggled with the decision. His instinct was to stay, to never let his children out of his sight. But Kale was right. If he could teach others what he'd learned, the impact would spread far beyond Taeyang 7. He discussed it with the children at dinner that night. They gathered around the long table, eating a much better meal than they'd had in the old days. Sola sat at his right hand as always. I might need to travel sometimes, he told them, to help set up orphanages like this one in other places. But I'll always come back, and Minji will be here while I'm gone. The children were quiet. Then Sola spoke up. Will you help kids like us? Yes, then you should go. We'll be okay. We're stronger now. The others nodded agreement. They understood that the fight wasn't over, that what had happened here was just the beginning of something bigger. So Daehyun began traveling. His first trip was to a station in the Corvin sectors, where a new orphanage was being established for children displaced by pirate raids. He spent 2 weeks there working with the local staff, teaching them not just procedures but the heart of the work. It's not about following rules, he told them. It's about seeing each child as an individual, learning their stories, understanding their fears, making them feel like they matter. The staff listened carefully. They'd heard about the human who had stood against the Union. His reputation preceded him. But actually meeting him, seeing how he worked, that was different. He wasn't a warrior or a politician. He was just a man who cared deeply and refused to give up. When he returned to Taeyang 7, the children mobbed him at the door. Sola hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. I missed you, she said. I missed you too. But I brought pictures of the new orphanage. Want to see? They gathered around while he showed them images of the new facility, the children who would live there, the staff who would care for them. His kids beamed with pride, understanding that their courage had helped make this possible. But not everything was celebration. The Sapient Rights Protection Act was stalling in council committees. The Vrin hierarchy, though they'd lost the vote on the decree, still had influence. They were working behind the scenes to weaken the new protections, adding exceptions and loopholes. Ambassador Youngji contacted Daehyun directly. Her face on the screen looked tired and frustrated. We're losing ground. The initial momentum is fading. The Vrin are playing a long game, betting that people will forget why this mattered. They're probably right. What can I do? Testify. Come to the core worlds and speak to the council directly. Tell them why these protections matter. You have moral authority that I don't. You stood in that doorway. You put everything on the line. They'll listen to you. Daehyun felt his stomach sink. Speaking to the entire Galactic Council in person? He was just an orphanage administrator. He wasn't a politician or a diplomat. I don't know how to give speeches, he said. You don't need to. Just tell the truth. Tell them about the children. That's all. So he found himself on a transport ship headed to the core worlds, the ancient center of Galactic Union space. Jinho came with him, insisting that he needed backup. Minji stayed behind to watch the orphanage, though she made him promise to record the testimony. The council chamber was even more impressive in person. Massive, circular, with seats rising in tiers for thousands of representatives. The air thrummed with translated voices, each species using their own language while AI systems rendered everything intelligible. Daehyun stood at the center, a single human in a sea of alien beings. He felt impossibly small. Above him, Thrak, the Vrin leader, watched with hostile eyes. This was the creature who had pushed for the decree, who had wanted to send children to labor camps. This was the enemy. Ambassador Youngji introduced him. Honored representatives, I present Administrator Daehyun, who manages the Taeyang 7 orphanage. He has direct experience with the issues we're discussing. I ask that you listen to his testimony. Daehyun took a breath. He'd prepared notes, but looking at them now, they seemed inadequate. So he put them away and spoke from his heart. I'm not good at politics. I don't understand all the rules and procedures you follow here. But I understand children. I've spent years working with orphans, kids who lost everything and everyone, and I've learned something important. Children remember. They remember who helped them and who abandoned them. They remember who fought for them and who looked away. The chamber was silent. Thousands of aliens listening to one human's words. Emergency Decree 771 taught an entire generation of children that they don't matter. That when times get hard, the adults will sacrifice them first. Do you understand what that does to a young mind? They'll grow up knowing that the galaxy saw them as problems to be eliminated, as resources to be used up. They'll remember that betrayal forever. Thrak spoke, his voice harsh. Emotional arguments. We make decisions based on logic and necessity, not sentiment. Then let's talk logic, Daehyun said, surprising himself with his anger. What's logical about creating a generation that hates you? What's logical about teaching millions of beings that the Union can't be trusted? You're not saving resources. You're creating future problems that will cost you far more than protecting children ever would. The decree was necessary for the war effort. The decree was slavery. Call it what it is. You wanted to take children and work them to death so you wouldn't have to find real solutions to your economic problems. That's not necessity. That's cruelty disguised as pragmatism. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some representatives supported Daehyun. Others defended the Vrin position. But Daehyun wasn't finished. I have 23 children at my orphanage. 23 kids who depend on me. When your decree came down, I had a choice. Obey and watch them be taken, or fight and possibly die. I chose to fight. Not because I'm brave or special, but because those children are my family and you don't abandon family. He looked around the massive chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as he could. Every one of you had families once, parents who protected you, communities that cared whether you lived or died. That's what childhood should be. That's what we owe every child in Union space. Not labor camps, not exploitation, just the chance to grow up safe and loved. The Sapient Rights Protection Act isn't about being nice. It's about being a civilization worth belonging to. It's about proving that the Union stands for something more than military power and economic calculation. If you can't protect children, what can you protect? Daehyun finished speaking and stood there, suddenly drained. He'd said everything he could. Now it was up to them. Youngji caught his eye from her seat and nodded with approval. Jinho, watching from a visitor's gallery, gave him a thumbs up. But the real test would come in the vote. The debate continued for hours. Species after species weighing in, arguing details, proposing amendments. Daehyun listened to it all, trying to follow the complex politics. It was exhausting. Finally, after what felt like days, the vote was called. The Sapient Rights Protection Act with full enforcement mechanisms and no major loopholes. The count came in, 892 in favor, 301 against, 87 abstaining. It passed, not just passed, but passed decisively. The protections would be real, enforceable, permanent. Daehyun felt his knees weaken. It was done. Children throughout Union space would have legal protection. Orphanages would be funded and monitored. The nightmare he'd fought against would never be legal again. Youngji found him after the session. She was smiling for the first time since he'd met her. You did it. That testimony changed minds. Even some of the Vrin voted for it in the end. I just told them the truth. Sometimes that's exactly what's needed. She paused, then added, There's talk of a formal recognition. The Council wants to honor 6 months after the Sapient Rights Protection Act passed. The orphanage network was growing faster than anyone had expected. 17 facilities were now operational across Union space. Each one followed Daehyun's model, small enough to feel like home, structured enough to provide stability, and always centered on the belief that every child mattered. But success brought new challenges. With fame came scrutiny. Union inspectors visited regularly, documenting everything, making sure the orphanages met the new legal standards. Media outlets wanted interviews. Politicians wanted endorsements. Everyone wanted a piece of the human who had stood against the Union. Daehyun tried to maintain normalcy for his children. They still had lessons every morning. Still did chores. Still played games in the common area. But cameras appeared outside the orphanage now. Reporters called constantly. People recognized him when he walked through the station. Sola, now 9 years old, noticed the change in him. She found him one evening sitting alone in his office, staring at another stack of interview requests. You look sad, she said. Not sad, just tired. She climbed into his lap like she used to when she was smaller. Because everyone wants to talk to you? Yeah, I just want to take care of you kids. But everyone thinks I should be doing something bigger. You are doing something big. You're being our dad. That's the biggest thing. He hugged her, reminded again why the work mattered. Children saw things clearly. They understood what adults often forgot, that the simple acts of care and protection were revolutionary in their own way. But the demands kept coming. The Axion Collective wanted him to help design training programs for new orphanage administrators. Human colonies wanted him to speak at conferences. The Union Council invited him to serve as a special advisor on child welfare issues. Minji finally confronted him about it. You're spreading yourself too thin. The kids barely see you anymore. You're always traveling or in meetings or dealing with bureaucrats. I know, but if I don't do this work, who will? The protections we fought for only matter if they're implemented correctly. And what happens to our children while you're saving the galaxy? They need you here, Daehyun, not as a symbol or a hero. As their dad, she was right. He'd won the big fight but was losing the small daily battles that actually mattered. The children needed consistency, presence, attention. They needed someone to help with homework and comfort nightmares and celebrate small victories. That week, he made a decision. He called Kale and explained that he needed to step back from the traveling and advisory roles. Other people could design systems. He needed to be present for his kids. Kale's crystalline body flickered with understanding. We worried this might happen. The work is consuming you. But I must ask, have you considered training a replacement? Someone who could manage the orphanage while you handle the larger responsibilities. No one can replace me here. These are my children, not replace, support, share the burden. You taught us that protecting children requires community, not individual heroes. Perhaps you should apply that lesson to yourself. Daehyun hadn't thought of it that way. He'd been so focused on being everything for everyone that he'd forgotten his own advice. He couldn't do this alone. He'd never been able to. The answer came from an unexpected source. Herein, the hacker who'd broadcast the original standoff appeared at the orphanage asking for a job. I want to help. Not with computers, though I can do that too. I want to work with the kids. Learn what you do. Be part of this. Why? She looked uncomfortable. Because I was one of those kids once. An orphan on a station like this. No one helped me. I had to steal and fight and survive on my own. When I watched you stand in that doorway, I thought, that's what I needed. Someone willing to fight for me. I want to be that for other kids. Daehyun saw the sincerity in her eyes. She understood the work because she'd lived the need for it. Okay, but you'll start at the bottom. Cleaning, cooking, helping with homework. The boring stuff. Perfect. Hire and prove to be a natural. The children liked her immediately. She was young enough to relate to them, but mature enough to provide guidance. And she had a gift for reaching the difficult kids, the ones who didn't trust easily. She'd been them once. She knew their fears. With Hiren's help, Daehyun slowly found balance. He could travel occasionally without leaving the children alone. He could take meetings knowing someone competent was managing daily operations. The orphanage became less dependent on him personally and more of a true community. But the universe had more challenges waiting. 7 months after the siege, Junho came to Daehyun with troubling news. The teenage boy had been monitoring communication channels as part of his engineering training, and he'd discovered encrypted messages that worried him. There are groups organizing against the Protection Act. Not just complaining, but planning actual resistance. They're talking about finding loopholes, ways to get around the protections. Who? Different species. Some Vryn who never accepted the act. Some human businesses that use child labor. Even some governments that see the protections as interference in their internal affairs. Daehyun felt old anger stirring. Of course it wasn't over. Changing laws was one thing. Changing hearts was much harder. Show me what you found. The messages Junho had intercepted were worse than Daehyun expected. Criminal syndicates discussing how to traffic children across borders where enforcement was weak. Corporations exploring legal definitions of volunteer labor that might apply to teenagers. Politicians arguing that certain species children matured faster and therefore didn't need full protection. All the old arguments, wrapped in new language. He forwarded the information to Ambassador Youngji. She wasn't surprised. The fight never ends, Daehyun. We won a battle, but the war goes on. There will always be people looking for ways to exploit the vulnerable. So what do? We stay vigilant. We document every violation. We make noise when we see problems. And we keep reminding people why these protections exist. She paused. We need you to speak out again. Your voice carries weight that mine doesn't. Daehyun wanted to refuse. He'd found his balance. The children needed him present, not traveling to give speeches. But he also knew that his kids weren't the only ones at risk. Across the galaxy, other children depended on these protections holding firm. He discussed it with his children at dinner. They were older now, more aware of the complexities. Sola understood immediately, you have to go. Not forever, but when it matters, you have to fight. That's what you taught us, Junho agreed. And I can help. I'm learning station security systems. I can monitor threats, give you early warning if something serious develops. Even little Nari offered support. I can reach out through networks, feel when people's intentions shift toward harm. I'm stronger now than during the siege. Daehyun looked at them with pride. These weren't helpless children anymore. They'd learned from what they'd been through. They were becoming protectors themselves. So he resumed limited advocacy work, but on his terms. He'd speak when needed, but he wouldn't abandon his daily responsibilities. He'd fight the larger battles, but never at the expense of the smaller, personal ones. The first test came when a human colony called New Seoul attempted to exempt itself from the Protection Act. They argued that their cultural practices included children working in family businesses, and the act interfered with traditional ways of life. The argument was clever. It wasn't openly advocating child exploitation. It was wrapped in cultural preservation and local autonomy, but underneath it was the same old greed. Children on New Seoul were working 12-hour days in dangerous conditions, and local authorities looked the other way. Daehyun traveled there with Youngji and Jinho. They toured the colony, documented the violations, spoke with children who were exhausted and injured from their cultural work. It was heartbreaking. At a public forum, colony leaders tried to dismiss Daehyun's concerns. You don't understand our culture. We're not like your soft-core world communities. Out here, children learn to work early. It makes them strong. Daehyun stood before a crowd of colonists, many of whom looked at him with hostility. I grew up working. I learned discipline and responsibility from hard work. But there's a difference between teaching a child to help and working them until they break. Your children are exhausted. They're injured. They're missing education. That's not culture. That's exploitation. Easy for you to say from your comfortable orphanage. My orphanage was a war zone 7 months ago. I stood against Union soldiers to protect children. I'm standing here now for the same reason, because children matter more than profit, more than tradition, more than convenience. The crowd's hostility wavered. Some colonists began asking uncomfortable questions about working conditions. Parents started admitting that maybe things had gone too far. The local media covered the visit extensively, and public pressure mounted. Within weeks, New Seoul revised its labor practices. Children's working hours were limited. Safety standards were enforced. Education became mandatory. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Flying back to Taeyang 7, Youngji smiled at Daehyun. You have a gift for making people uncomfortable with their own choices. That's powerful. I just tell the truth delivered with moral authority. That's rarer than you think. When he returned home, the children 5 years had passed since the siege. 5 years since Daehyun stood in a doorway and refused to let the Union take his children. The galaxy had changed in small but important ways. The orphanage network had grown to 43 facilities. The Sapient Rights Protection Act was enforced, though not perfectly, and children across Union space had more protection than they'd ever had before. But the real changes were harder to measure. They lived in the children who'd grown up knowing that someone had fought for them, in the adults who'd watched the standoff and decided to care more about vulnerable beings, in the slow shift of consciousness that said children mattered, that protecting the weak was strength, not weakness. Daehyun was older now. Gray touched his temples. Lines marked his face. He tired more easily than he used to. But his eyes still held that stubborn fire, the refusal to bow that had made him legend. Sola was 14, tall and confident, already showing signs of the woman she'd become. She'd taken Daehyun's lessons to heart, studying law and politics, preparing for the day when she could fight for children the way he had. She was enrolled in advanced courses at the station's academy, earning top marks despite having started life in rubble and ash. Yoonhyo was 19, serving as the orphanage's security chief. He'd completed engineering certification and military training, becoming exactly what he'd wanted, someone who could keep people safe. He still had the scar on his cheek, but now he wore it with pride, a reminder of where he'd come from. Nari had grown into their telepathic abilities, becoming a counselor for traumatized children across the network. They traveled from orphanage to orphanage, helping kids process grief and fear, showing them they weren't alone in their pain. What had started as survival instinct had become healing gift. Minji had taken over day-to-day operations of the Taeyang 7 orphanage, allowing Daehyun to focus on the larger network. She ran things with compassion and efficiency, proving that the work didn't depend on any one person. The orphanage had become an institution, sustainable beyond its founder. Hierin had risen to become assistant director, her understanding of abandoned children making her invaluable. She'd adopted 2 of the orphans herself, creating a family from the community she'd found. She often told new children her story, showing them that survival was possible, that wounds could heal, that future wasn't determined by past. On the 5th anniversary of what people now called the standoff, Taeyang 7 Station organized a memorial ceremony. Daehyun had tried to decline, uncomfortable with celebration, but Sola convinced him it mattered. People need to remember why it happened. What was at stake? If we don't mark it, if we don't tell the story, people will forget. And when people forget, the protections get weaker. So he agreed. The ceremony was held in the station's main plaza. Hundreds attended, residents who'd witnessed the siege, families who'd sent children to the orphanage network, officials who'd helped implement the Protection Act. Representatives from a dozen species stood together, united by shared history. Ambassador Youngji spoke first. She'd become one of humanity's most influential voices in the Union, and she credited Daehyun with teaching her that moral courage mattered more than political calculation. 5 years ago, one human administrator made a choice. He could have obeyed an unjust law. He could have convinced himself that compliance was wisdom. Instead, he stood in a doorway and said, "No." That single act of defiance changed the course of history, not because it was dramatic, but because it was right. She gestured to Daehyun, standing uncomfortably at the side of the stage. "We honor him today not as a warrior or a politician, but as a father who refused to abandon his children. That's the legacy we must remember, that protecting the vulnerable isn't optional. It's the measure of our civilization." Kale spoke next, their crystalline body shimmering in the plaza lights. "The Axion Collective operates on logic and consensus. We analyze data, calculate outcomes, optimize efficiency. But Administrator Daehyun taught us that some decisions transcend logic, that moral imperatives exist beyond calculation. His actions forced us to confront uncomfortable questions about what we valued. We are better for that discomfort." Then Sola took the stage. Daehyun hadn't known she would speak. She looked at him with those eyes that had first caught his heart in the rubble years ago, then turned to address the crowd. "Everyone talks about what my dad did during the siege, how brave he was, how he changed the galaxy. But I want to tell you about what he did after. The small things, the daily things, the things that actually mattered to us kids." Her voice was steady, confident. "He helped with homework even when he was exhausted from meetings. He remembered everyone's birthdays. He stayed up with us when we had nightmares. He taught us that we were worth protecting not because we'd been on the news, but because we were his children and he loved us. That's the real story. Not the dramatic standoff, but the 5 years of showing up day after day, proving that his promise meant something." She looked directly at Daehyun, tears in her eyes. "You saved us twice. Once from being taken away, and once from believing we didn't matter. Thank you for being our dad." The crowd erupted in applause. Daehyun felt his throat tighten, overwhelmed by emotion. He'd never been comfortable with praise, but hearing it from Sola made it real in a way nothing else could. Finally, they called him to speak. He walked to the center of the stage slowly, looking out at hundreds of faces. Human and alien, young and old, all gathered to remember a moment that had become larger than itself. "I'm not good at speeches," he began, as he always did. "But I want you to understand something. What happened 5 years ago wasn't special. It wasn't heroic, it was just a father refusing to let his children be hurt. Parents do that every day across the galaxy. They sacrifice, they fight, they protect. I just happened to do it publicly." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "The real heroes are the people who've taken that moment and built something lasting from it. The orphanage administrators working in difficult places. The politicians who fight to keep protection strong. The citizens who speak up when they see children being exploited. All of you who decided that what happened here mattered enough to change how you lived. 5 years ago, I stood in a doorway because I couldn't imagine doing anything else. Today I stand here because thousands of you have joined that fight. You've created a system where children are protected not because one person refused to bow, but because an entire civilization decided that protecting the vulnerable defines who we are. He looked at his children in the front row, at Minji and Hyerin and Junho and all the others who'd become family. I'm proud of what we've built, but I'm more proud of who these children have become. They learned that standing up for what's right matters. That family is choice, not just blood. That the galaxy can be cruel, but it can also be kind if enough people choose kindness. So on this anniversary, don't celebrate me. Celebrate everyone who's chosen to protect children. Everyone who's refused to look away from injustice. Everyone who's decided that the most vulnerable among us deserve our strongest protection. That's the real legacy of what happened here. The applause was thunderous, but Daehyun barely heard it. He was watching Sola, seeing her pride and love, and remembering that little girl in the rubble asking if he was there to help. He'd said yes, and he'd kept saying yes every day since. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Daehyun endured handshakes and congratulations, uncomfortable with attention but understanding its purpose. People needed symbols. They needed stories to remind them why the work mattered. Jinho found him hiding near the refreshment table. Still hate being famous? More than ever. But Sola was right. If we don't remember, people forget why it mattered. The kids turned out pretty amazing. They were always amazing. They just needed someone to see it. Later that evening, after everyone else had left, the orphanage family gathered for their own private celebration. 23 children originally, though some had aged out and moved on to their own lives. New kids had taken their places, the cycle of care continuing. Currently, there were 18 children calling the orphanage home. They sat around the large dinner table, eating Minji's cooking and sharing stories. The mood was light, celebratory. These were the moments Daehyun treasured most. The simple joy of family together. A new arrival, a small alien child named Rin who'd come to the orphanage only 3 weeks ago, asked the question everyone always asked eventually. Is it true you really stood against the whole union for us? Daehyun smiled. Not just me, all of us. We stood together. But you were in front. You were the one who could have died. Being in front doesn't make you special. It just means you happened to be in the right place at the right time. Any parent would have done the same. Sola shook her head. No, most wouldn't have. That's what made it matter. The conversation continued, stories mixing with laughter, past blending with present. This was what Daehyun had fought for. Not fame or recognition, but this simple moment of connection, of belonging, of family. Late that night, after the children were asleep, Daehyun stood at his office window one more time. The same window where he'd stood 5 years ago, watching his children play, making the decision that would define his life.